incredible guest. I'm genuinely amazed that this is happening. But everyone, please welcome Chuck Tingle to the show.
Hello.
Oh my goodness.
I am happy to be here. This is very exciting. I love the live thing. Just that countdown started and my hair's raised on the back of my neck like a dang race car driver ready for the green light.
Yeah, it has been you came up a couple weeks ago on the show.
I don't know that if you know this, but my first experience with you was Everybody's Live, John Mulaney.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, yes, that must have been quite the surprise. I think that a lot of buckaroos who were aware of me had one perspective of that situation, and then a lot of folks, including John himself, did not, and I think it made for a really fun time. Speaking of live, like what a magic moment, right? To just it gets a little hectic.
Are you willing to? So I don't ever think of myself as being a rube from Kentucky, but maybe my naivete. When I was just like, oh my gosh, they put a number on the screen, and people call in live, and Glenn was like, well, no, John and the dais might not know what the phone calls are coming in, but I'm sure that those are booked in advance and vetted.
Okay. I can, yes. The reason that I think I am comfortable speaking about that is because I think that their answer is a pretty good one, you know, and also like you're not necessarily.
I don't want to ruin the kayfabe.
Yeah, you don't want to tell everyone that Santa Claus may or may not be real. I won't. No spoilers. But no, Glenn is on a good track, and I do admire that about the show because I think they could very easily have everyone in on. I think most shows probably would. The way that worked was I was contacted by a producer who asked me to come on, but nobody knew. Like it's not like John knew that I was they really don't know. So you are correct, Glenn. It's kind of half and half. Like the producers are setting it up. I will also say that I think a couple of them are like in the bank for people who are like specific to the topics just to have a good show. But they also do actually include in their like pit that they're pulling from real people just calling in that number. So I think they I'm impressed. I think they do it about as
that's a good balance.
Actually live as they potentially could to put on a good show.
And that's what I've been digging about the show, and then watching that a particular episode with the panel being Conan, Tina Fey, the actress from The Bear. Like when you came on, I was like, oh, this is a bit. And so then I Googled your name, and I swear I was unfamiliar, and now I have found out how wrong I was. I brought you up on the show, and Glenn's like, oh yeah, Chuck Tingle.
Yeah. And he mentioned, he's like, oh, this guy, Chuck Tingle, called in. I was like, hang on. Chuck Tingle's not a guy. Chuck Tingle is a known entity.
I appreciate the vote of confidence.
No, but long story short is everybody that I've mentioned you to, I was very much in the minority. And I am so glad that I am now with no meaning behind it. I'm glad that I'm exposed to you now from Everybody's Live, and I'll let Glenn take over from there.
Yeah, I mean, that was basically what I was saying. Of just that interview or call-in came up on the show because Ricky asked if I'd seen it, and I hadn't at that point. And he's like, yeah, some guy called in, Chuck Tingle. And I was like, the Chuck Tingle? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, Chuck Tingle's like a huge, I would say, I don't remember the term I used. I think internet
Let's
celebrity.
say icon. Let's say icon.
Legend. Icon, I think, is genuinely fitting.
Yes,
and
I'll take all of them.
I've known about you from like pounded in the butt by my own butt days. Like,
oh yes, okay, you're an original buckaroo. Yeah.
I was a writer for a website.
Did you hear that, Glenn?
Yeah,
you're a buckaroo. He just called you a buckaroo.
I know, it genuinely feels great. So Ricky's pointing it out because my favorite movie is Buckaroo Banzai, but also.
Yes.
Knowing that that's how you refer to fans is
yes.
But I was a writer for a site called Geekosystem that's not around anymore. So like we covered a lot of like kind of niche internet stuff. And 2009, 2010, when you I don't know when you started putting out Tinglers.
I mean, it's been about I think maybe 11 years now, something like that.
Yeah.
It's got to be, well, maybe less. It's around a decade, honestly. Could be like 9, 10, 11 years, but I know I'm coming up on a decade. And I will say, there are so many ways that buckaroos find me, and which obviously will elicit all kinds of different reactions, right? I'm well aware that the way I present myself, the way I speak, the way I look, the art that I make is unusual and strange. So it's like it's kind of a fun thing where everybody's exposure to it almost is part of the art itself, because it completely reframes how you're going to take in what I'm doing. That's why, something like the Mulaney show, I'm not going to be offended if people don't automatically like take it at face value. And it's almost like my superpower. Artistically, it's like a Trojan horse. You can really talk about a lot of important, interesting, fun things in a kind of a strange package. So I love it.
That's why I think I was fascinated with it as possibly a fake character that they were writing. And I'm not saying this to be demeaning. It was just my experience
I
with
understand.
it.
I appreciate
and
it.
I found out again how wrong I was, but not wrong of just like, no, he's not famous. I was like, I just did not know. I told my gay brother, he was aware of you, who he's avid reader, great friend of mine, co-screenwriter. He was just like, oh yeah, Chuck. And he named like 10 books.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. he knew. And I was just like, I love this. And everything that you're saying, Glenn and I, with being stand-ups and big comedian historian buffs, like the unknown comic, the idea of the mask that you wear, we're big, Glenn and I, of Steve Martin, Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman, like a lot of what you were doing with the performance art aspect of it, as I grew to learn as of whatever 2 months ago when everybody's live, like I have experienced.
He's been playing catch up pretty hard.
Yes. I'm that scene in Austin Powers where he's being introduced in a montage, all the things of the 90s of the last 20, 30 years. That is how you have been in my life.
Well, welcome to the Tingleverse. What a great arrival. I appreciate what you're saying. I think, it is not to talk about myself too highly, but I do think that with the age of the internet, where everything is just kind of available, and I also feel like there's just a lot of, there's so much irony online. Maybe that's a cultural generational thing, and I'm very sincere, and also I think because I've been doing what I've been doing for so long, kind of under the radar, I think it's kind of like a rare example of the counter culture, or like a counter icon type of thing that we kind of don't have anymore. Because now if somebody does something online or something, it kind of becomes more like a meme. It just blows up and it's there for like a month and then it goes away. I've been creating this art sincerely for 10 years. And so I think it's probably pretty exciting for people to discover, like, oh, this reminds me of kind of either the early days of the internet or pre-internet, where you'd find some strange show on public access or something, where there was a sense that unusual art could exist outside of like the bubble of it being a meme online. And I think that's probably refreshing for people like yourself to discover this and think, oh, that's not like a character for the show. This is someone doing things,
it makes it better. The sincerity, and a word that comes up constantly on Daddio podcast is genuinely. We always talk about being genuine and genuinely appreciating something. Your Andy Warhol, like John Waters kind of approach to pulp, how would you genre yourself?
Those are absolutely the drawing points. Andy Kaufman, did you say Warhol?
Mm-hmm. So I said Warhol, but Kaufman, before like unknown comic.
Yes,
Kaufman
I call it like the two Andys as my influences, but it is true. It's like Warhol's approach to pushing the boundaries of what art can be, of saying, it's not just, like pop culture itself can be art. It's not just the canvas, it's the story around it. It's not just a can of Campbell's soup or a screen printing of Elvis, right? It's the context that we give it. And then Kaufman, absolutely. Another one who just is taking existence itself and putting a frame around it and saying, like, what is this going to be now? I think that it's interesting for you both to come from like a comedy background, because I think people don't give, especially like comics who have been around for a while, enough credit, in the sense that I think a younger generation might see me and instantly think, oh, that's irony. And it's interesting that you both, knowing comedy, especially like the 70s, sort of like the Kaufman type thing, or like even people like John Waters, Paul Rubin, like all these people that you're naming, were sincere. And I feel like we're kind of lacking that. And maybe that's why you immediately, after digging a little bit, are like, oh, there's sincerity there, where I think younger buckers kind of have a problem, because the internet is a very ironic place.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite performers is Frank Sidebottom, who, similar to the mask and, that you wear for interviews and stuff and appearances, he would always perform in a giant paper mache head. The real guy was Chris Seavey, but he just wore this head and he kind of became this character. And the whole time when he was performing, there was this question around it of like, how much of this is a bit and how much of it is this guy needs to do this for another reason? Like, is it like, oh, wouldn't it be crazy if I just performed in a big silly head? But then John Ronson wrote a book about his time playing in the Old Blimey Big Band with Frank Sidebottom, and he's like, no, it was sincere. Like, it was that it's head helped him become that performer.
Yes, it's the old like Batman versus Bruce Wayne argument. Who is the put on? I have found, for me, I go back to a quote. It's like
Bruce Wayne. Batman loves killing kids.
Yeah,
Batman loves killing orphans. That's fully his personality.
Yes, and a mask, as Oscar Wilde said, give a man a mask and he will tell you the truth. It is. I think that we see physical masks as on a surface level a lot, but you are right. Like a giant paper mache head can be a way for you to get in touch with who you really are. It is to break down kind of the social walls is incredibly helpful for me. I can even directly say, this, I absolutely do not think of this as a character. There's things that I have to do to protect my privacy, like kind of change my voice a little bit different. I obviously wear a mask. There's all these things, but ultimately, I definitely don't see it as a character. I see kind of everything else as a character. I'm also on the autism spectrum, so like there's a thing called masking with autism, where you kind of like have to act. It's called neurotypical masking, but just to maneuver through the world. And so I am very good at masking, and it was causing some health issues for me, tension in my body, stress, all these things that you kind of never think are going to catch up with you. And then one day you're in the emergency room with your whole body clenched and tight as a screw and a bolt. Yeah. So as I started to do these things as Chuck, create kind of with this pink mask, the physical mask, it really opened things up for me. It's such a powerful tool. So yeah, I would say that I am, Chuck is probably a more honest representation, to be honest.
Yeah, that was kind of the read that I read interviews and stuff with people who worked with Chris and Frank Sidebottom, who since passed, but they're like, no, it genuinely seemed like it wasn't. I don't think anybody talked about it as a character. They're like, no, when he puts the head on, he just becomes Frank Sidebottom. Like, he is just.
Yeah, it's an interesting. There's almost not enough language for it, because I certainly don't mind when people say a character, right? Like I wouldn't say it, but I kind of understand. It's like, I think to do this, I already had the empathy, but I've also developed a lot, because like I do recognize that this is unusual. Like I'm not going to hold it against anyone for reacting to me in an unusual way. I am by definition being strange, in the Webster's definition of that.
Right.
And so it's fine to react to someone being strange. But if we're going to go like art theory, kind of like we're talking about now, or like comedy theory or anything like that, I would not say character. I actually wrote a thing that was almost published in the New York Times when my first big book, Camp Damascus, that was my first traditionally published book. I wrote a piece called "This Is Not a Bit" that was about everything that we're talking about, that the New York Times wanted to run. And then they said, we really like this. Can we cut the word count? And then we're going to run it. And I cut the word count and sent it in, and it was never run. So it's one of those things that like is kind of sitting in their archive somewhere, but it's basically the conversation we're having now.
That's I would love.
Oh,
to
great.
read that.
So do you, are we ever, would you be willing to shoot it our way, or do they own it because you sent it to them?
Well, actually we retracted it because or I don't know the process, but we, like, after a year of it sitting in their archives, we were like, can you not publish this? And they said sure, because I try not to talk. This is like another art thing. I don't like to really talk about like my projects before they happen, because there's a lot of science behind, like, if you talk about your art as you're working on it, you're less likely to finish it. There's like this strange thing. So I rarely do, but I will say in the context of this, I am working on like a nonfiction type book, kind of about my life and about basically about what we're talking about now. That is essentially that New York Times piece turned into like a full novel length nonfiction book. So that's kind of something I'm working on right now. So we had them retract it.
That's great.
Can't wait to read it. But you're right. The thing about I know I've read headlines, at least on some of the studies you're talking about, where it's like, oh, if you talk about doing something, it scratches that same itch in your head as actually doing it.
100%. Yes.
There's no one I take less seriously in comedy than somebody who's like, hey, I'm thinking about trying stand up. I've been like writing all this stuff, and it's like, go do an open mic before you ever talk to me again. Go perform and let me know how it went. I'm not interested in you, talking about it before. You have to go do the thing. If you're actively pursuing it, I will talk to you all day. I will give you whatever, advice you think I can help you with. I'm here for anybody who wants it. But if you're just like, oh yeah, I'd be pretty funny if I went up on stage. All right, then go do it and find out. And that's the system. And I'm, other than, writing jobs for a couple websites, it's like, I've not put out, a book or anything, but if I was going to be writing something, it's like, yeah, I feel like if I was just talking to my friends about this project that I was writing, I could just be writing it. So why would I run an idea by Ricky or what? It's like, I'll get started. I'll see if I like it. And then I'll,
we do that with jokes, right? Yeah. We do that with jokes, or with me being a screenwriter too.
I will do it with jokes.
Like
with
I
certain
am,
people,
happy
like
with collaboration.
Ricky and I do a lot of shows together.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, well, his opinion matters to me. It's when there's newer comics that I know, or even when I was starting out and people are like, oh, do you want to like get together and write? It's like, not really. I mean, I love hanging out, getting coffee. That sounds great. But I don't want to sit there and write simultaneously.
That's really funny. So I am obviously with the mask, like a pretty solitary buckaroo. And I have kind of recently developed a little bit of like a writing group with some fellow writers. And it is funny because what that entails is like, okay, every other week meetup where everyone says, oh yeah, we're gonna go and write next to each other in a coffee shop, and then you get there and it's just the, like 3-hour gossip time. And we all know that's what not a word is written.
And
that is great.
That's what book clubs are.
That sounds
Yeah.
incredible.
There's a time and a place for that. But yeah, I am on the same page. I don't really like, I have like one or two very trusted people who I will, run something by. But in general, this is just, I don't know. Maybe that's specific to your art or your comedy too. Maybe there's people listening that are like, that is the opposite of me. I want
I mean, I have
whole
friends
thing.
who do it, like they ask me because that's their process. They're like, oh, it helps if there's a couple of us together, and I can be like, hey, is this anything? And I was like, I don't know, try it for it doesn't matter if I like it, do it for an audience. Like that's what counts. But
Yeah,
for
like
me,
trust yourself that you know what your humor is.
Well, that's
Yes.
for me, that's what it is. It's like if I think
Yeah.
an idea is funny, it is, as far as I'm concerned, objectively funny. And whether audiences don't
Whether
like
that's
it,
narcissism or it's you're trusting the expert.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
arts by committee, I think, generally is not as good as something that an auteur did in any medium.
I agree completely.
Yeah,
and you mentioned autism. It
Yes.
comes up a lot on this show because I think we started in October of last year, and basically around
Yes.
that time was when I realized that I am also on the autism spectrum.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Yes,
I got officially assessed and got the results last Friday, and was told I'm not autistic.
Oh, okay.
But the reasons were because I'm married, too smart, and have too much ADHD. And I was like, well, you can't tell me how smart I am and then that I'm wrong.
So here's an important, I think that this is a great topic because I, over time during my life, and I think adults, especially autistic adults, will have this, where so many of the tests, even the medical ones, I do think are poorly worded. I think they are poorly done because so many of them will be phrased at something like a great example would be like, do you look people in the eye when you talk to them? So for me, I'm on the autism spectrum, and I do look people in the eye when I talk to them. The question should be, does it feel natural to? Do you want to? Does it pain you to, and so I have developed all these skills where I can mask very well, probably like you go through your whole life, it changes, you develop and these things. So a lot of the way these like current tests are worded for autistic adults are asking like, do you do this, rather than is it comfortable for you?
Right. Have you learned how to do this over the past 42 years?
Exactly.
And it's like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to look people in the eye. I don't like it. Also,
here's my level of autism. I understand and can learn to socially exist.
The other thing they said, because I was doing an assessment,
it needs to be a little bit more specific.
You're breaking up quite a bit there, Ricky. I don't mean to talk over you, but you're cutting in and out. I sat across from this woman for like a 3-hour assessment, and I didn't realize till I left, but I was wearing these glasses, which I got recently because everything is too bright all the time because of sensory issues. And I have other ones that are clearer that I meant to switch out because I was like, oh, she's going to be like looking at my eyes and stuff. She didn't say, oh, hey, you're basically wearing sunglasses. That's going to make this difficult. But then she also filmed it and then showed that to a colleague, and they conferred. And her colleague was like, oh, yeah, he's making pretty good eye contact. I was like, you cannot. There's no way you can tell me you're watching an iPhone video of this interview with the phone's 20 feet away from me that you can tell what I'm looking at in this video. And they're like, oh, you didn't do any like repetitive hand motions. My hands were under the table the whole time, lady. You couldn't see them. I was absolutely stimming down there like a wild man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes. I think, for me, that's like part of why I like, the mask that I wear when I am trotting around as Chuck too is the glasses. It is really the first time that I like went to a big convention or something and realized, oh, that feeling of reminding yourself, okay, you have to look this person, that like that constant reminder to not have that was just wonderful. So I'm sorry that you had trouble going through this. I hope, that like, this is something that is your own journey, and your validity in them is your own business. Like you don't need
It's
any
very
of that
touching to
stuff.
hear. Thank you, Chuck. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
and it's it's a shame that so many buckaroos go through that, but it's these are the systems that we're thrust into.
The people that I've talked to, like, it's clear this is not, unfortunately, a unique experience. And
yes,
my other autistic friends have been so, even months ago when I started talking about it, it's like, I think might be on the autism spectrum. And they're like, hey, welcome on board, man. Like, no one's been like, oh, you got to prove it. But to me, just having a doctor tell me I'm right feels nice. And I would like that to happen.
Well, honestly, for me too, that is about, like, I am somewhere between self-diagnosed and officially, because when I was I was about 20 years old, I was at a therapist and I had suspected I was autistic.
Mm-hmm.
I I didn't really know what was going on at that time. People looked at it like it was a dang death sentence. Honestly, it was not seen in the same way, but I saw an interview with David Byrne from Talking Heads, who is one of my heroes, another big, like, autistic focal point for me.
Legend.
And I found out, oh, why is he acting just like I am in this Letterman interview? I've never seen someone who acted like me. And then I did a little research and found out that he is also on the spectrum. What I was diagnosed with was called Asperger's, but now they kind of just rolled that into autism in general. So I went to a therapist. I talked about this and I said, what do you think? And my therapist said, I think you are very likely on the spectrum. Do you want to work to get an official diagnosis? And I said, well, what are the pros and cons? And he basically said, well, you might get dropped from your insurance, because at the time there was pre-existing conditions, and they said, oh, well, it's incurable and all this stuff. So he said, you're going to have to check your insurance. There's a lot of different things. And we decided to not get my official diagnosis, just because there was all this, like, stuff that he was like, that might be negative to your life. So I am somewhere in between as well, where it's, like, I'm confident in it, and it's, I don't have anything to prove to anyone, but it was a similar thing where I just said, I don't need the official thing if that's gonna, and now with kind of the way things are working out, like, I'm not on some government list now, which is kind of nice. So, it's, there's all kinds of reasons.
I mean, you are on a government list.
Yes, I'm on
you are on a government list. It's just not for autism.
We're probably
I'm on the dinosaur erotica list.
You're on a list just for appearing on this show. We should have warned you.
Yes,
they're listening. But it was, like I said, I've talked to so many people. It is not an unusual experience, but also everyone that I talked to about it before going through the official diagnosis process, not a single person in my life was like, there's no way you're autistic. Like,
oh wow, you know what? That's really. Oh wait, they said there's no way you are or aren't.
You're not. Yeah, no one was like, you're not autistic. Everyone was like, yeah, man. A friend of mine is an autistic and ADHD life coach, and she's like,
oh,
hey, but I've only known her for a little over a year, and she's like, I swear to God, man, I thought you knew, or I would have brought it up.
You're actually very lucky. That says a lot about the people close.
Yeah,
to
I have
a good way,
pretty carefully curated list of people
kind
that
of
I'm
uncommon
willing to interact with.
It's actually really common for buckaroos to hear, oh, well, you don't look autistic.
Yeah, I was really expecting more of that, honestly. Even from, like, my mother, who has, I will say, a different relationship with medical science than I do, to put it in a nice way.
That is the most amazing needle you just threaded there, right?
So I also have an autoimmune disease, and when I got diagnosed with that, and I was like, "Oh, Mom, I have this thing called ankylosing spondylitis." She's like, "I don't think you have that," and it's like, "No, there's a genetic test. It's pretty clear. I do. Everyone in the family should probably get checked." And she's like, "No, that sounds made up." But even my mom, when I was like, "I think I'm on the autism spectrum," she's like, "Oh," I'm like, "Oh," because I told her, I was like, "I think we can go get assessed," and she's like, "Good for you, sweetie." It's like, all right,
wow,
if Mom's on board,
you
know.
Supportive, even if she doesn't agree.
Yes,
right. That might be the case, but I've talked to her more about it since then. And like, oh, I'm genuinely impressed by how my mother is handling, because other people in our family have also been diagnosed on the spectrum or with similar conditions, and she's really rolling with the punches. So way to go, Pam. You're crushing it. I just saw we have a
one question that
Mike is sending a phantom tingle.
A friend of mine who is Mike Flincham watching the live stream. Eric M. Hunter, who is a horror novelist, he says, "Congratulations on the award that you just received for Bury Your Gaze."
Oh, thank you.
He wanted to ask, has there been any subject matter that that you have
I've lost
thought
your
about
audio,
writing,
Ricky.
but
Can you hear Ricky,
from
Chuck, or is it
publish?
just me?
I mean,
I can hear. I can. Yes.
Oh, okay.
I got all the way to the subject matter
Okay.
that I thought about publishing.
My apologies. I'm gonna.
Okay. Is there anything that you have thought about?
Connection here and see if that.
Okay. We'll continue. Is there anything, a subject matter that you have thought about writing a story or have written a story and then have not published due to possibly disrupting your fan base, or just you were like, you know what, this may be something that I got it out of my system, but then I put it back in the drawer because
that's a good
either
question.
It's too personal.
Yeah. So on the, I mean, anyone listening,
we kind of touched that with the New York Times article a little bit.
Yeah, well, anyone listening probably, I should say, I have two basically types of publication. I self-publish my erotica that a lot of buckaroos know me for. That is, I would call surrealist. Some call it comedy, although I don't even think of it as comedy, but I do think of it as like surrealist erotica. And that's self-published short form. And then I have my long form, traditionally published horror novels, both of them queer themes.
Mm-hmm.
But with the shorts, I have a couple of rules. The one is that I will never write about like a sort of like a natural disaster, a war, like something where people are actually dying, losing their lives. You'll see a lot after, like, it'll be like some hurricane will tear through somewhere, and inevitably the language of the news report will say like hurricane whatever pounds this, and everyone, I get tagged in it, and I understand that. But just for me personally, if there's anything with like a death toll or anything like that, I'm just not gonna do it. And then the next thing was, sometimes, because I write about current events, there are people involved, and I really early on decided like I wasn't going to write about celebrity or like famous women, because I just feel like culturally, it's one thing for me to like write a story where Donald Trump is a dinosaur and gets pounded or whatever. I feel like women in the limelight get sexualized so much that it's just like,
yes,
I don't want to like contribute to that necessarily. And with both of those rules, like, this is a comedy show. There's all this kind of discussion about the role of comedy in different lines. Like, if other people in other situations want to argue their case and do these things, like, whatever, that's going to be your trot. For me personally, that is something that I don't like want to be involved in. And if someone can make these things work, then that's their business. But those are the ones for me.
I think personal ethics,
that makes sense,
is something we've talked about before.
We've talked about, Ricky and I have two bits that are actually pretty similar about our daughters asking us if something is real. In his bit, it's a skeleton. In mine, it's a tornado. And I've done it a couple of times, and then it goes over like a lead balloon, and then I get off stage and I find out earlier that day there was a terrible tornado somewhere.
Wow.
And it's
okay,
like,
yes,
the joke's obviously not about the one that just happened. It is just my daughter was very young, and she thought the cartoon tornado in the movie Hercules, like the monster at the end, that's what she was talking about. So when I was like, yeah, those are real, because I just thought she meant a tornado.
Yes.
But it's the thing of like, a terrible thing just happened. People don't want to hear a joke that makes them think of that thing.
Yes. Well, this is what I love about comedy, specifically. Like, I am not a big comedy buckaroo. You would think I would, but I think emotionally, in the art that I create, I know a lot of like stand-up comedian buckaroos, and you're probably the same way, where there's kind of this thing in their soul of like, they like live and breathe like comedy and stuff. And I
Yeah.
don't have that innate drive to make buckaroos laugh. I just kind of stumble into it, I would say. But something that I do love about comedy is it's one of the few art forms where everyone is kind of accepted that like art is not static, that it is constantly changing, and one joke on one day will be totally different on a different day in a different room. And when I talk about that with books or film or anything, people kind of try to put art into a like a science lab, like it's this timeless thing that is not interacting with a changing world, and you got to just see it for what it is. Comedy, I find people are much more open to, and probably because they are viscerally hit with it when they try to do stand up and something doesn't go over. They're like, oh, that joke completely changes depending on the world that it is told in. It's kind of beautiful, I think.
Absolutely. And I think with books and stuff,
Past,
people have
present,
different
and future.
reactions. Yeah, people have different reactions to them based on, I mean, any art, not just books, but you react to art differently based on your circumstances and experiences. Catcher in the Rye is a great book, or a great example where, like, if you read that when you're like 16, it's incredible. But you try to go back and read it in your 40s, you're like, God, this kid is so insufferable. I'm glad he's having a miserable time at this school.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, I read that book at those ages, and
maybe he'll learn something from this.
But I did. So it's like, not that it's, I mean, I've heard people talk about it now. They're like, oh, Catcher in the Rye sucks. It's like, well, no, it's not written for you. It's written for,
Yes.
young men having a rough time at their Catholic university their first semester.
That's a nice view to have, because I think that like with art, it is good to have a little empathy for, like, in the way that you're saying of maybe this isn't for you later on. That doesn't necessarily mean it's terrible. It just means that like it is really attached to a time and a place, and that's fine. Like that's the beauty of art. That's how creation works.
My daughters will go through phases with different musicians, and for a while they were really into JoJo Siwa.
Oh wow. Yes. Okay.
Not my favorite period of time, but it's like, well, she's not making music for men in their late 30s. She's making music for children my daughter's ages. Like,
yes,
they love it. They're not wrong. But also the time that they got very into her, she only had like 6 songs out. So it's like, we cannot just listen to the same 6 songs over and over again. Daddy's going to lose his mind. So
yes,
we've got a 3 cycle limit on playing all the JoJo Siwa hits that you know and love. And then we got to put something else on.
Yes.
And now they're very into Taylor Swift, and it's like, great. She's got like 11 albums or whatever. So it's not, again, I don't think Taylor Swift is making music for me, a 42-year-old man, but there's enough of it that it's like, well, it's not the same 3 songs over and over.
Yes.
Again,
it's also, you know what, here's something that I really love about Taylor Swift. Growing up, for like a pop starlet, let's say, they were very like, none of them were necessarily playing the guitar or anything like that. They were just kind of singing. Now there were certainly rock women, right, that were playing guitar and all that stuff. But in the world of pop, like in the world of the biggest artist in the world, that all these young ladybucks were looking up to, it was just a different thing. And I feel like it is really glossed over culturally how cool it is that like the biggest, pop star that these young girls are looking at, not only is like playing guitar stuff, but is writing her own songs and co-producing her records, all this stuff. It's kind of amazing the way that has evolved, and I love it. I think it's really, really cool.
Agreed.
And from my vantage point, with having a 6-year-old daughter and her being into Taylor Swift for, I think, a lot of the things you're talking about, which is just representation. If you see it in a certain light, then you see more of yourself and the possibilities, and you're going to glom onto that if that exists. The one thing that I've noticed is that Taylor Swift doesn't seem to be at this moment at her almost height sexualized, like, or overly sexualized. And I like that by, being a father of a 6-year-old daughter, that isn't something that she is exuding from listening to the music or watching her perform or whatever. She is recognizing the intellect and the musicianship. She is, she's recognizing so many of these other things. It's nothing has been like, oh, and she's observed as this just thing to get dudes off. And I feel like that is something new.
We all
from
have
the Britney
our
Spears or the Christina Aguileras or Paris Hiltons.
Sure, we all have our traits, right? As an artist or a creator, that is like, what are we really? What is the forefront of our identity? And I would agree that she definitely has, put other aspects of herself as the forefront. Absolutely, which is kind of an interesting. It's just quite the change, right? I mean, to think that people can see her and say, I want to be a songwriter. Like, that's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I've killed my mic. I told Ricky too, because he was breaking up again. I just want to see if that'll maybe help.
Look at all of us have disappeared
now it's
into the
extra mysterious.
There you go.
Now we're all wearing our masks.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are just one letter.
Picking my nose so hard for the rest of this episode.
But that is a question that comes up constantly, Chuck, throughout the exploration of this show. Glenn and I have each participated and have done a special for a company called Dry Bar Comedy, which is known as a clean comedy outlet. And we don't both exclusively work clean. That is not necessarily who we are, but we have been asking the question since this podcast began: what does clean comedy mean? And
that's
even though you are not a comedian or a performer, what does that mean to you, just hearing clean comedy?
I mean, okay, so going off, I feel like my answer, speaking of autism, is just going to be very logical, and like my autistic brain is like just trying to define this. But I mean, I would say that clean comedy is a performance that you are trying to elicit laughter without using certain techniques that I think like basically are registering a certain types of laughter, right? You've probably, as you're creating your sets, recognize that there's like, however many types of jokes you want to divide it into, but they are kind of like functioning on, you only have like 10 or so different like fulcrums that the magic trick that is a joke is functioning on. And I think clean comedy is essentially saying, okay, like 3 of these little fulcrums are off limits right now. And generally that would be like profanity, I'm guessing like bodily humor type stuff, things like that. I don't know, that would probably be my definition of what it is you're intentionally limiting these things that socially some people have said are inappropriate in whatever the circumstances that they're trying to create this entertainment in.
Now, since you have your self-published Tinglers and the more traditionally published books that come out, do you approach those differently in terms of like the material that you're bringing to them, in terms of, I mean, not that you've worked clean in the way that we're talking about, but it's like, oh, well, this one's self-published, so this one's kind of just for like the real buckaroos out there who are going to let me get as weird as I want in this. Versus if you're working through a traditional publisher, they're gonna be like, hey, can you maybe if this part wasn't as weird as it is. I hope you understand that I'm using the word weird in the best.
No, I totally understand. That's a great question. That's a very good question. I am very fortunate, as like a bit of a punk rock buckaroo myself. It kind of pains me to say this because in writing, I am traditionally published through one of the big 5, right? So it's like in a punk rock context, you could say the major label. I am on the major label of writing, and it pains me to say it, but I have to tell the truth, which is that like Macmillan, and then I'm on Nightfire, which is a division of Macmillan. they let me do whatever I want, and they are shockingly art forward. It's like, this is me praising the major label. I hope I don't get struck by lightning. But they really let me do kind of whatever I want. I mean, it was part of my contract, very specifically, to say, you know, I am contracted to these horror novels with you, and I can write and publish as many erotica pieces as I want. Like, it was very clearly laid out. They knew what they were getting into, and they are very supportive of it. I think, and to switch to like a film metaphor, because you see this a lot, there are some authors, just like there are some directors or something, that are kind of like working artists, right? They are working directors, they're working writers who the film company will say, come and like make our script and just do a decent job, a good job of this. And we don't want a bunch of extra character or anything. You just need to make a good product. There are versions of that in writing, certainly.
Make our Star Wars. It has to be Star Wars.
100%. Yes, 100% like that. Or Marvel is another one like that. And that is fine. I really don't want to disparage that. Like, in art, there is a reason that they have people like that. And then there's another thing that's like the auteur director, right? It's like, you know, your Tarantinos or Nolan or whatever. They are not going to just make one of those things. They're going to make something that is specifically them. When I was signed to these book deals, they definitely did not sign me as like a working writer. They signed me as like an auteur writer. It would be very wild of them to spend the money on me that they have and then ask me to not be Chuck Tingle. You know, right. They're not going to sand down my edges because those edges are what they paid for. So it is really fortunate. Like, I feel incredibly grateful for this, that I have somehow ended up in this position to just, you know, someone at that company really likes art. It's like the things you mentioned before, like, you know, Paul Rubens, like Pee-wee's Playhouse, or these things that we look back on where we're like, how was that a thing? And it really is just this weird circumstance where someone takes a chance on a strange piece of art. And now I'm in this position to kind of make it. It's really beautiful and rare.
You mentioned like with film, I was thinking of the director Todd Solondz. He came when I was in college. I forget which one of his movies. I think he screened Storytelling, because that was the one that came out the year I started college. And was doing a Q&A after, and I asked, I was like, how do you get away with what you are putting in your movies in a way that most studios aren't willing to put this material out? And Storytelling in particular has a pretty graphic sex scene, and there's just a big pink bar over part of the screen to like block it. And it's because his contract said he can put whatever he wants in the movie, but the studio reserves the right to cover or beep whatever they want.
Oh my gosh.
So that's like the handshake deal of like, yeah, man, you can do it. You can put this in the movie, but we're going to put and I think he told me his counterpoint was that whatever they cover it with had to be a pink rectangle to like make it so obvious that
that's
like
really funny. Yes.
So you can't hide that you are censoring this. We're going to draw as much attention to it as possible. And then also David Lynch comes up on the podcast a lot, where I think he was an example of like why he hated working on Dune so much was, like you mentioned, the publisher's not trying to sand away your edges, but they were absolutely doing that to him, of like, he didn't have final cut. He didn't have final say on a lot of the creative decisions. And he's like, why would you get me to do this if you're not going to let me do this?
Oh,
and
yes. Great question.
Yeah. It's with stand-up. It's so much of it is just my whole job is based around standing there and talking about whatever I feel like talking about in the moment. So the reason I push back on the idea of being labeled as a clean comedian who always works clean, it's like, I work clean most of the time, just kind of by default, but don't tell me I have to, or I'm not going to want to. And it's like, you booked me because of the work you've seen me do already. Just trust that I can do the job that you're hiring me for without putting additional limitations on it.
Oh, absolutely. I also, as I'm sitting up here talking on my high horse about, my circumstances too. It is really important to remember that like some of these things, like there are a lot of, I'm sure pretty much every artist would prefer to be like the auteur side of things, right? Like so some of it is circumstance, which is just, a lot of it is even luck of like what position or needing to work to make a living. Like sometimes you're going to have a gig that they're like, this is clean, and you're thinking, well, artistically I don't necessarily want to do that, but like this is a good payday to pay my dang bills, take care of my family. So it is, I definitely understand too that like some of this is like circumstance, like you people have to work.
A comedian and likely future guest Brian Atkinson was watching a live stream a couple weeks ago when we were talking about this. And he works very clean, but he talks about it as like, well, it's authentic to me because he worked in radio for a long time. So he's like, I professionally had to work these words out of my vocabulary. So now it would be weird if I just started using them again.
That's fascinating. Yes, absolutely.
And for me, so much of my material is about talking about, my kids and my life. So it feels weird to be like, oh, here's a cute story about my daughters who I love so much. Now here's one about me getting railed. Like it just that back and forth doesn't flow for me in a way that I would like. And I would rather talk about my kids than getting railed. So I tend to default to being clean. But the second I find out I have to be, then I worry.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because it means so many different things to different people. I did a church gig once that complained afterwards because I did a joke where I mentioned TikTok, and that's apparently the work of the devil. And It's like, I never would have guessed that would have been the thing. Honestly, like,
wow.
If you would have told me, don't do jokes about TikTok,
you wouldn't have done a joke about TikTok.
I like to think I wouldn't have, or I would have just done an hour of jokes about TikTok.
You're all TikTok set.
It's the PDA thing with autism of like, the second you tell me to do something, I don't want to do it anymore. If you tell me not to do it, I want to do it.
Yes. That's like, to go back to, initially when I was saying the different like fulcrum thing, like you have these tools, right? And if we're saying, okay, these 3 tools I'm not using for the gig, there are plenty of comedians who just would prefer to not use those tools. When they're asked to work clean, they say, those are covered in dust. I don't even know if those work. They're rusty. Yeah. That's not what I do. So it is, there is a wide breadth of artistic expression, especially through comedy, of just being like, where do you naturally go?
Well, and being like
ahead,
a queer novelist, one of my pushbacks on being labeled as clean, or like having anything marketed as clean, if I do it, I can work clean, but I also don't necessarily love those restrictions. But for me, it's even more of the coding and the kind of audience that attracts, or seems to attract.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I don't like that anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, that is like what parts of the culture are you going to start speaking to if you have if you have said, I am putting myself in a circumstance where I am specifically going to limit these topics, then certainly you are going to find yourself cultivating an audience who naturally doesn't want to talk about those topics, which I would imagine is kind of a more conservative audience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although, what's funny though, is I guess it does. There are all kinds of audiences that don't want to talk about certain things. Different people have kind of co-opted, the idea of what is free speech and stuff. It is very funny. As an older buckaroo, it's very much like that is the conservative thing. I actually personally still think it is still that way. There's a bit of an illusion, I think, that I'm sure you guys talk about all the time, because it's such a thing in comedy of like, who's saying you can't say what? And I kind of find that it is still mostly the conservative side saying you can't say this, but there's this illusion that it is not.
They are giving you a list of words you can't say, while they are also railing about how they're the free speech heroes.
It's a very weird little magic trick going on culturally right now that is kind of astonishing to me.
Because one thing we've noticed talking about this clean comedy thing is a lot of the times that just precludes topics of queerness, whether or not the jokes themselves. Fortune Feimster is a very well-known clean comedian, and she will tell a story about going on vacation with her wife or whatever, and people will complain that, you know, she's pushing an agenda or she's, you know, sexualizing, and she's like, I talked about going to Disneyland with the woman that I'm in love with. Like, what are you talking? Like, it's the tamest, cleanest story, but because a lot of the people, and again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I think a lot of the people who are seeking out clean comedy don't want to hear about, you know, just the idea that there's queerness in the world.
Yes. Well, it's hard. It is also hard for me to, you know, I'm trying to have empathy to put myself in this situation. And other than like maybe going to a show with your young children and profanity, it's really hard for me to put myself in the position of like when I would ever want that personally. I just can't really relate to the idea of, oh, I want this comedy to be clean. It's a very foreign concept to me. And maybe it's because I deal in the taboo so much. You know, my erotica is obviously like the sexual taboo. And then my horror is like taboo in the sense of like violence is horror, is you also have the threat of violence is part of it. So it's like I deal with taboos all the time. All of my favorite art is like using these tools. And so it's very hard for me to even fathom why I would want to relinquish these tools. There's so much beautiful art that uses sexuality and violence. It's a part of human nature. So with comedy, I'm like, I just can't relate. I don't really know.
I mean, one of my favorite comedians who's not, you know, me or Ricky, is Nate Bargatze, who is well known for being very clean, but that's not what I like about
he's
him.
Great. I really
he's so good at what he does. And the fact that he's clean is like, oh, neat. Like, what if he,
but it does make me knee jerk a little bit.
I don't, he doesn't lose me, but he would lose probably a lot of people.
Yeah. Well,
I am a little suspect though. I don't know why.
I think it's probably, you know, it's just one of those things where I think we are all asked kind of more than just the art. We are looking at this performance, especially in comedy, right? If you're seeing stand-up, they're right in front of you. And we are kind of in the back of our mind running this calculation of, is this sincere? To get back to what we were talking about, you know, or you were saying genuine, you know, is this earnest? There are so many words for it, but that completely will shift, because if you see someone who just happens to be clean and you're in the depths of your soul, you're resonating, this person is just being themselves. This is an honest expression of themselves. The second you start thinking, well, they're doing that for a different reason, and it starts to read not genuine, I can see how that would just change everything about it, right? It's hard it changes the jokes. Everything registers differently.
Yeah. There's
one thing I wanted to ask.
Oh, go ahead, Ricky.
Sorry, just one thing I wanted to ask you about before we don't want to take up too much more of your time. But last question that I had was specifically about the character Harriet Porber.
Oh, yes.
The trans wizard. Was that as knowing if anybody looks you up, they will see how you popped with your ISO and your very unique titles and subject matter. Harriet Porber, I can only assume, I hope you haven't talked about this too much, is in direct response to J.K. Rowling and all of her transphobia.
Yes. Yeah, it was. It's interesting because the way people talk about that, and speaking of like intention in art, everyone, you see a lot of these things where people say like, oh, Chuck wrote this out of spite to spite J.K. Rowling. Yeah. And all this stuff. And it's funny. I don't think I've ever created a piece of art out of spite. I'm not saying that that's wrong.
You should. I've done it a lot and it feels great.
There you go. You know, some people do. And I always want to make it very clear. Like, I'm not saying that is incorrect. It is just the way that I function is to create out of love. It's the only way. So the way that I would see something,
your
like that,
genuine art comes out of not doing it cynically or doing it out of spite or doing it out of retribution. You genuinely look at the positive of like, oh, I'm going to put this together because I like what this does, how it elevates something or brings
and I think
attention
this
to
is
something.
a really good example, because it is something that, like, I certainly did not like what J.K. Rowling was saying. I don't like what she says now about trans people. It's
Same.
you know, and but
Agreed.
when all of that happened, or was happening, and when I wrote that book, I very intentionally sit down and think, okay, I have these feelings of disgust or anger, but when I sit down to write this, what I'm going to draw from, like, the creative fuel is going to be actually like one basket over. Let's see what's in here, and it's my love for trans people. It's going to be, you know, what about it is making me angry? What part of that is my love for people's autonomy, my love for people to express themselves, my love for trans people that I know? And so anytime I'm creating, I am always saying, okay, there's the spite bucket. It's okay to have, and a beautiful art has come from that. Like, I don't want to disparage that at all. But I find, for me personally, and I think, you know, it's worth a try. Shifting that over and thinking, like, okay, why am I angry? Where's the love behind my anger? It's not about J.K. Rowling. It's about the trans people that I love. So that is kind of my approach to things like that, if that makes sense.
It does,
Mm-hmm.
and I agree. I think there was on my last special, I did a joke based on the idea of like, how would I react if one of my kids told me they were trans? And I mean, the boring real answer is like unconditional support. But then it's like, well, how do I turn this into a joke? And while I was working it out, it's like, well, should I be the one talking about this? Like, my children have not told me they are trans. I am not trans. Like, should I even be broaching this topic? And Rawling in particular, there was her and so many other high profile people were talking about it and saying the opposite of how I feel. So it's like, well, all right, no, if they're going to talk about it and be kind of shitty, I will come at it from the other way. And so I did this joke where I talk about my daughter went through a period where she would only answer the name Elsa because of Frozen.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's like, well, I could try to explain to her that it's not her name, or what, I'll buy you the outfit. Yeah, absolutely, Elsa. Come on, I'll help you run your kingdom.
Yes.
And it's such of the jokes that I've done, it is the one that like bigots will find and come at me for. And it's like, you're mad that I'm saying I love my kid. You are absolutely unhinged. Like,
It's pretty
it,
wild, right? Yes.
yeah,
And I
You do
applaud
not even
you.
pick up the hypocrisy in what you just
Yes.
heard.
right.
Absolutely. And I applaud you too for, like, you know, that is, it's so interesting. So many people, I would say, who are probably not the most successful comedians, that will complain about, like, it really is like, you can tackle these subjects. It's, you just need to, like, have a little thought about it, and it's almost like the veil has been pulled back, where people are very much understanding now that comedy is not entirely about the jokes. It's like, it's also like, what's your perspective? What's your, what,
Yeah.
like, are you being honest about the world? And so much of, like, the conservative comedy thing, the reason it doesn't fly isn't necessarily the joke structure, although that's maybe suffering too, but it really is because, as an audience, you still have to think like, oh, I agree. Oh, that makes sense. So that's something I relate to. And I feel like they've completely thrown that away to, like, make points or just, like, talk about something that they don't actually have anything to say about. So the fact that you were able to approach that and think, okay, this is maybe a hot button topic, but and what I have to say is about love.
Yeah.
That's the key, right? That's like the beauty of what you can really do with comedy.
Because I mean, the joke stemmed from real events. Of, I was in a Facebook group for dads, and the topic, somebody brought up the topic. They're like, how would you handle it if your kid told you they were trans? And that made me start considering it. And then the thing about my daughter only answering to Elsa, that was a real 6 months to a year phase in her life where she just kept telling everybody, she's like, my name is Elsa. Please only refer to me as Elsa. And it's like,
that's great.
Hey, yeah, you're my kid. I'll do whatever you want. I'm on board.
Yes.
And it got to the point where it's like, I understand that this is a phase. So that was the part where I was doing it as a joke. It's like, I don't want trans people to think I'm comparing their experience to like a phase a child is going through. But there was an earlier one where she was insisting she was a puppy. And I was like, oh, well, that joke doesn't work, right? I can't make that comparison. But when she's like, no, I feel like I really relate to this character. Like, that is who I feel like. And that was an easier bridge to make. And I talked to a lot of people about it.
It's great too, because it's a Disney queen, which you rarely get, like with daughters and stuff. Like my daughter, Anna, who is 6, she glommed onto Elsa as well. And she recognized, she's like, wait, all these other ones are princesses and this one's a queen.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And I was just like, yeah. And she's like, this is infinitely better. She's like, I'm not happy that their parents are dead, that they done got Batmaned as well. But I do love that she's the queen.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's amazing.
Chuck, I just realized the time. We've kept you here for about an hour. I don't know if you have a hard out, but I will give you the opportunity to bail. Ricky and I tend to go long on these.
No, this was wonderful. I really enjoyed chatting. And I love like art theory and comedy theory and just these different things. This has been a really wonderful conversation. So thank you for having me. And let me know again. I'll trot back in the future if
you're welcome back anytime. We had an incredible time talking with you. If you want to let the Daddios and Buckaroos out there know what you have coming up.
Okay. Well, I have a book coming out.
Feel free to plug.
I have a book coming out this summer called Lucky Day. It is a queer horror novel, and it gets into all kinds of weird theories about all kinds of stuff. And you can find me on pretty much any social media platform. Just look for Chuck Tingle, and I'll be there. And I look forward to trotting with you.
Chuck Tingle's Lucky Day, Poker Face meets Contagion in this next novel by USA Today bestselling author and beloved internet icon, Chuck Tingle. You have made my day. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for everything you do and giving people your art.
Thank you.
I love people who, it seems like you crack the code on being, as we've said, genuine and authentic to yourself. And that is rarefied air, in my opinion.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Buckaroos.
I think you're such a inspiration in terms of, I always talk about, you have to just do the thing. And you've really been doing the thing for a while now, of just the amount of work that you've managed to put out is incredible, where if anybody feels like, I got to really overthink this project, it's got to be perfect, I think. And again, not to say that your work is not perfect, but you just do such a good job of like, we're doing another one. This one's out. We're going next. And I think that mindset is so important.
People say we've been talking about circumstances kind of sanding down your art, right? And I do find that no matter how strange you are, all those seeming imperfections are the things that make your art special. And that if you really stand firm long enough, instead of the world sanding you down, you can start sanding down the world, and you can bend it. So yeah, it's pretty exciting, and thank you both for being here. It's so kind.
That's the goal. Thank you so much, Chuck Tingle, and everyone listening. We'll be back next week.
It's the Daddios Show.
Yeah.